program. All right, so before we get into all of the different setting menus that we're going to go through and pick apart piece by piece, I want to mention profiles. Profiles are used to save settings inside of the settings menu. This is extremely useful if you need different settings for recording or streaming, or if you plan on using multiple accounts and you don't want to have to go back in and adjust, to have the settings for one Twitch account, a second Twitch account, a third Twitch account, a YouTube account, all those kind of things, or if you plan on streaming or recording in different bit rates and file sizes and things like that, and this saves you tons of time. All you would do is click on profile, create new profiles, and then like I said, you can rename them, and whatever settings you make for that profile is specific to that one, and then you can create a new profile and then do other settings inside of those. Like I said, extremely useful if you plan on doing multiple accounts or just need a use case of where you don't want to have to mess with those settings over and over again. So without further ado, let's jump into the settings. To do so, we can click on the settings right here in the bottom right hand corner, or we can go to File and then Settings. Either one should work for you. And we're going to be looking at our general settings first. So most of these settings are self-explanatory. If you would prefer to change like the language or the theme, you can do so here, and then automatically check for updates and stuff and open up stats and things like that. But most of these things people aren't really going to need, and they're, like I said, they're pretty self-explanatory, and you can go through here and see if any of these are applicable to anything that you want to use. For the sake of this tutorial, we're not going to go through every single one of these settings because these are pretty much, like I said, for this the third time, pretty much self-explanatory. So let's go ahead and move on to the video settings. Kind of skipping over the general settings, this right here is where I tend to start whenever I'm setting up OBS on a computer for the first time. The first thing you want to mess with is the base canvas resolution. This should be set to the resolution of the native resolution that is of your monitor. So if you have a 1080p monitor, set it to 1080p. If you got a 1440p, set it to 1440p. 4K, set it to 4K. This is just dictating or trying to pull off of what your monitor is set to. The next setting, which is the output scaled resolution, this should be set to the resolution that you either wish to record or stream at. So for example, if I wanted to stream in 720p or record in 720p, I would just click on the drop down button here, and then I would change this to 1280 by 720. If I wanted to stay at 1080p, I would just leave this at 1080p, and that's going to go ahead and let us record or stream at 1080p. The downscale filter is the method that OBS uses to convert the output resolution. So for instance, if we change this from, the monitor is set to 1080p and we wanted to change it to 720p, we can set that here. I would do some research if you guys are interested in trying to find out which downscale filter is best for you, because certain ones are better for static images and stuff on screen, say for example like a PowerPoint or a presentation, and then other ones are really good for live action moving stuff, and other ones are better for like gaming and things like that. So find out which downscale filter works best for you. And the next part, in the last part inside the video settings, is FPS values. I tend to leave it on common FPS values, and if you are streaming or recording, I like 30 or 60. If you're doing any kind of cinematic work and you need these other resolutions in here, they are already pretty much in here. I don't know of any other resolutions or frame rate people might be looking to record or stream at. Maybe if you want to go really high frame rate over 60, you could do that in here with the integer FPS value. But for everybody else, I would suggest 30 or 60, depending on which you plan on recording or streaming at. The next thing to look at is audio. When it comes to the general settings, I normally suggest leaving everything alone if you're not familiar with sample rate and the different types of audio channels. However, if you are experiencing some issues with the audio, the sample rate may be causing that. So look into what your devices like natively support for sample rate, but pretty much everything by default in Windows, not everything, but most everything defaults to 44.1 kilohertz. And if you have issues with it, like I said, go ahead and look at that. Channels, if you're not certain what those are, stereo is pretty typical for everybody. And I don't know really anybody who's doing surround sound inside of OBS, but it's definitely something you have the option to do. And then there's also mono, but for the most part, 44.1 in stereo works for pretty much everybody. Next up is the audio devices. The first two options are for desktop audio. This is where you would typically hear audio from, for example, like your headphones or speakers. You would set this if you wanted people to hear what you hear, for example, whenever you're streaming. The other options are for microphones or auxiliary inputs. This is for devices that you would use to typically talk to people. So for example, like a dedicated microphone or a microphone that's built into your headset, you would select those here. I'm not too certain what the meters are typically used for, so I'm not going to act like I know what those are. And then moving down to advanced monitoring devices. Monitoring devices used for testing audio levels inside of OBS or just hearing back what is being played. And this is great if you're trying to use it to balance multiple audio channels at once. So if you had like 3 or 4 microphones inputted into OBS, this would give you a good understanding, and you could hear back of what all the audio sounds like kind of meshed together, and you could adjust those as needed. The last section in here is audio hotkeys, and you can enable push to mute and push to talk for your specific microphones. So this is a really cool feature that you can go ahead and do, and then you can even add a delay in for those push to talks or push to mutes. Moving over to the streaming settings, this is where you would go to go ahead and configure a stream. All you have to do is click on a service and then select your service from a drop-down menu. So for example, if we select something like YouTube, it's going to ask for a stream key. Click on this right here. It'll take you directly to where you need to get your stream key from, and go ahead and copy and paste it in here. I want to state that if you have a stream key, do not share it with anybody, because if they get your stream key, they can stream to your channel, and it does not require signing in. So they are it's very critical to not show that to anybody. And some sites now like Twitch and I believe Mixer offer just connecting your account directly, which is pretty easy to do. You just click connect account and it would pop up a screen to go ahead and sign into your account, and then it'll give you access to start streaming to that platform. The output section is where we can adjust settings